spirit leaders, and special guests, welcome to this year's The IX event. Please join me in welcoming to the stage LNS Research Co-founder and commercial leader, Mehul Shah.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. How's everybody doing? What great energy. I'm humbled, I'm honored, I'm excited to welcome everybody who's here today in this beautiful city of Chicago and everybody who's watching us virtually to the 2023 Industrial Transformation Executive event. The theme of today's event, Operations 2030, the journey to Zero Plus. It's a bold vision, a vision that we at LNS Research believe is achievable by every single organization here. Let me talk to you a little bit about why we are here today. We are here today to talk about the future of operations. What is Operations 2030? What is Zero Plus? Zero Plus is a vision where our operations, where our manufacturing operations are not just sustainable, they are regenerative. It's a vision where we achieve zero harm to people, zero harm to our products. We achieve zero waste, zero net carbon emission, and drive step change improvement in our production environment. Let's see if I can get my slides. Awesome. So why is this important? I think it's pretty self-explanatory why Zero Plus is important. But there are three specific reasons on why Operations 2030 is important. One, it is definitely the right thing to do. It is our moral obligation to protect our planet and our people. Number two, a reason that everybody likes. It's good for business. If we are sustainable, if we are more productive, we're just more attractive to our customers and to our investors. And the final thing, it is essential for our long-term survival. We all know the challenges related to sustainability, climate changes. And if we don't change today, if we continue to operate the way we've been operating for 15, 20 years, we might not be in business. Operations 2030 basically talks about change. And one thing that every leader here cares about is how do I make my organization change? The one interesting thing about change is people don't change because corporate has a digital transformation initiative. People change because they believe in the vision. They believe in their leader. They believe that the path that we have is right for them and is right for the broader community. The journey to Zero Plus is one of that vision that you can align the organization to change as we get into this uncertain world. Look at these companies. These are all the companies that are attending here. Can we please all give them a huge round of applause? I would challenge you to talk to somebody that you don't know, to understand their pain points, to share your stories. We grow better together as a community. The goal of this event is to have meaningful discussions, not just at this event, but hopefully continue that even after the event. We have several of our members that met here and that have done consistent benchmarking by going to their plants, inviting people to their plants. This event is an opportunity to have some of those meaningful discussions. Let's see, show of hands, who here have attended an LNS Research event before? That's amazing. I see that number growing. Thank you again. Thank you for supporting LNS Research. Thank you for being part of the LNS Research family. For folks whose first time is for the LNS Research event, we have a power-packed agenda for you. I think most of you have seen this slide. Why do we exist as a business? We have a profound vision. What you all do is extremely difficult. You're trying to drive change across the global organization, anywhere from 20 plants to 1,000 plants. We wake up every morning with our goal to empower leaders like you to transform industrial operations. And we don't do that by providing solutions. I know it's contradictory, but nobody understands your business better than you. Your ability to change, your culture, your people. Any external organization giving you perspective, it's not going to be taken well by your industry. You cannot outsource strategy creation. What we do is challenge you, give you a way of thinking, give you a process to prioritize your capabilities so that you get to scale earlier than your competitors. In the world of industrial transformation, we happen to do it better than anybody in the world. We do that by doing three things. One, providing deep research in the area of industrial transformation. You talk about change management. An educated workforce is easier to change. Two, by providing access to research leaders that have walked in your shoes, that not only understand digital, but they know how difficult it is to change within the plants. And three, really providing you a platform like this. Whether it's an event right now, whether it's our event in February around Pathfinders, or our virtual roundtables. Your ability to consistently benchmark and learn from leaders is going to make you go faster in this journey. Over the next day and a half, we plan to do all of that so that we impact your Operations 2030 strategy. Similar to your organization, we face a similar challenge. What research should we prioritize? There are so many things that we could do. How do we do something that's not been said by 10,000 people on the internet? Because you already have access to that. So we made it very clear when we started this company that we want to be the advisor to the operations leadership of Fortune 10,000 companies. And when we look at operations leaders, what do they care about? And we talked about three things. One, how do I go faster? How do I get my organization ready to go faster? Two, and you'll hear a lot about this, the workforce challenge. How do I get my workforce challenge in control, and how do I get ready for the future of industrial work? And three, how do I make sure that my operating model is changed? It's not a separate digital initiative or Industry 4.0 initiative, but it's my company's core operating model that's changing. We have a lot of other topics, whether it's quality, safety, reliability, the extremely important topic of data, and you'll hear all about that over the next day and a half. So here is the bird's eye view of today's agenda. We start with an amazing keynote session. I'll introduce the keynotes in a couple of minutes, but we'll have two sets of roundtables. Each roundtable, anybody who has been to our event, one of the things that we try to do is try to focus on discussion that comes outside of the slides. We do have slides. You will see presentation from around 35 executives from companies from companies around the world. But what we want to do is what happens between the slides. And these roundtables are formatted so that you can have those meaningful discussions. I feel extremely happy when I see this slide. Look at the caliber of speakers. Look at the quality of speakers. They're going to inspire you. They're going to challenge you. They're going to make you think outside the box. Can we please give a big round of applause to all of our speakers today? So in the morning, you'll hear about the idea of scale and readiness. We have two roundtables focused on operational data architecture and industrial data model because it's such an important topic. You'll hear about digital performance excellence and quality 4.0, and then you'll hear about the idea of building an operations strategy. In the afternoon, we basically take a turn towards industries. Every industry has their own challenges. We start with this whole idea of information and automation architecture, and then going into specific industries, whether it's process industries, CPG, food and beverage, life sciences, and the broader batch industries. We end the day with an amazing panel. You see the speakers out here. They're going to challenge you. They're going to push you to think outside the box when it comes to the topic of industrial AI and the value they bring to your organization. I want to thank all of the sponsors. Without them, this event would not have been possible. We have their CEOs, strategy leaders, commercial leaders all here, and they all are doing something really interesting to help their clients get to Operations 2030. I would recommend you talk to them to understand the art of possible. What are they doing that's next gen, that's getting their customers closer to their operational and financial goals? Please give all of the sponsors a huge round of applause. Thank you for supporting us. I'm really excited to announce our keynote panel, keynotes here today this morning. So we'll hear from Ellis Jones. We are super excited to have him back on keynotes. He has around 30 years of experience transforming EHS, operational excellence and sustainability for global industrial organizations. He will challenge you to think outside the box as you lead your organization towards Operations 2030. We'll have John Genovesi. He has around 30 years of experience helping companies drive digital transformation across a variety of industries globally. He leads the enterprise software and advisory business at UL, a company that's focused on safety, sustainability, and EHS challenges. With that, I would like to introduce your first keynote speaker. He doesn't need any introduction. He and his team are the brains behind LNS Research. Please welcome Matthew Littlefield, President and Research Leader.
That was great. What a great intro. Thank you, Mehul. Welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. This is our 5th year doing this event. 2 years virtual, 2 years in person. We've now tipped the scales for our 5th year in person. So it's a pleasure to see you here all in person. But I would also love to welcome everyone on LinkedIn Live who are joining us virtually. So today I want to talk about productivity pathfinders, those companies that are achieving real results when it comes to Operation 2030 and the journey to Zero Plus. So last year at this event, I challenged the audience and all of our members with 2 ideas. The first being that if you don't transform, if you don't take some action in some of these areas that we're talking about, that you're thinking about, that you're working on, you may persist as a company. You may survive as a brand, as a product development organization, as a supply chain organization, but you very likely will not own or operate your assets. And the second was this concept of uncertainty is the only certainty, and an accelerating pace of change. So take a journey back in time. Think back a year ago at this event. Would you have predicted what happened over the past year? I remember planning for last year's event. We were still in the throes of the pandemic. There was a lot of concerns if we'd be able to challenge folks, if there would be travel restrictions or not. The Ukraine war was just starting. It was going to be a quick one. At least that was what Putin said, right? And now it's dragged on a year, and we're being dragged into a second war. Inflation has been trending down. Interest rates are persisting and even going higher. Organized labor has gained momentum. There has been pushback and politicization of ESG and DEI initiatives. And generative AI has gone from really the back room, the back office, to mainstream. I would not have predicted all these events. I don't think I would have predicted half these events. But that's not the only challenge. How do these events impact our businesses? So last year, the Inflation Reduction Act passed. One of the major implications from that, which you would not have necessarily assumed, was price controls across the US on drugs. And that's only going to increase. And that's putting new cost pressures on pharma companies that they haven't faced before. Many of those companies would not have predicted that. This one's an interesting one. I think it's the first time in human history that interest rates have gone up, and the demand for building materials have also gone up. Interest rates raised so quickly that nobody wants to sell their house. Nobody wants to give up their 2% mortgage for an 8% mortgage today, right? So home builders are building more. Nobody's selling. So would Owens Corning have predicted that? They made the Wall Street Journal a month ago. Probably not. They probably would have thought demand for my products are going to go down when interest rates go up. So how do we address this? How do we address this increasing pace of uncertainty? And it's what we talked about, what Mehul talked about in the vision, right? It is all about agility, flexibility, and sustainability. So one of the highlights that we've seen over the past 5 years, even the past 10 years, is an increasing focus on the idea of industrial transformation. We do this study, our industrial transformation tech study, every 2 years. We've been doing it since 2015. The skeptics, we've almost eliminated the skeptics. Only 12% of companies now believe that industrial transformation will not add benefit to the organization. Right? So we have over half of the companies who have initiatives, who are working on this, and another third that are in the planning stages. Right? So this is happening at scale in industry, which is very encouraging. But as more and more companies go down this journey, more and more challenges are emerging. So we saw 3 new challenges accelerate in 2023 as compared to 2021 and 2019. They were mainly around people and scalability. So the first, which we had one-to-ones yesterday, every single one-to-one I had, number one issue, right? Hiring, retaining, training a future-proofed workforce. And it shows in the data. The other, which is new to the agenda, which wasn't here 2 years ago, is scaling quick wins across the organization. In fact, a lot of companies don't even want to scale those quick wins. They need to scale transformation. And that scalability is a major challenge for a lot of organizations, and we'll dive deep on that today. And then the final one, which is new and emerging, is frontline and plant management buy-in. So we all have our own terms for industrial transformation. It could be digital transformation, digital manufacturing, smart manufacturing. Has that become a dirty word in your organization? Is it the corporate guys are here to help with smart manufacturing, or hey, the corporate guys are here to help, right? It's the way that you say it. We talk a lot about the power of prepositions, right? Is this something that is happening to the organization, with the organization, or buying for the organization? So these challenges are real. I first flashed this earlier in the year. Paul Boris and Mike Carroll spent a lot of time on this, also highlighting these trends, pointing us in this direction. If you look at overall labor productivity in manufacturing, or across industry, it has been a long-term up into the right trend. This has been going on for 40 years, really as long as we've existed as a country. But when you look at just the manufacturing industry, and it's a cruel twist of fate, but in 2011, when Industry 4.0 was first announced in Germany from their Institute on Artificial Intelligence, US manufacturing labor productivity flatlined. And we actually have lower labor productivity today as a country in manufacturing than we did in 2012. The problem is productivity is not just a throughput-output challenge. When you start to see productivity flatlining, you also start to see safety improvements flatlining. You start to see quality improvements flatlining. And this is the current state of the industry today, that each new benefit, each new incremental gain is harder to get than the last one. We are topping out, we are hitting the limit of our existing approaches to manufacturing. So what do we do? Unfortunately, a lot of times when I share this data, and I know this happens to others when they share this data, the typical response is cognitive dissonance. Let's find ways to say this isn't true. The definition must be wrong. The data must be wrong, right? It's government collected data. I can't really trust that data. It must not be accounting for changes in wages or inflation. It must not be accounting for outsourcing manufacturing to low-cost organizations and companies and countries. Hey, this is aggregate data across the entire country. Right? My company's different. My company really is growing productivity and quality and safety improvements, although I might not be measuring it that well. But this is just one country and one input. Right? Is this really a global challenge? Does it go into other areas of manufacturing, right? Like energy costs and energy intensity, or material costs and material intensity in our products? So there's a truth in those challenges. And it's always good to be challenged, right? It pushes you to think about new ways to figure out and improve. So can we assess global operations? Can we assess all the inputs, not just labor productivity, but energy productivity, material productivity? And can we use real audited financial data to test this? And the answer is yes, we can. So this is our first public preview of the Industrial Productivity Index. So we spent the last 6 months studying 166 publicly traded companies. This goes across 8 industrial sectors. And in each of those sectors, we have looked at the sub-industry that these companies are in. And we've assessed these companies on revenue, cost of goods sold, productive assets, so plant, property, and equipment, and then looked at price changes, both PPI and CPI within those sub-verticals. So if I'm ExxonMobil, the largest oil company in the world, am I more productive if oil prices go from $80 a barrel to probably $100 a barrel in the next 2 months? No, right? I just benefited from a change in commodity prices. So we want to eliminate that variance and account for those changes in prices and say, hey, I'm more productive if I actually deliver more product with less inputs. And that's what this is studying. And so it's not actually as bad as just the manufacturing labor data. So manufacturing labor productivity in the US is a challenge, and we need to focus on it, because when we don't improve productivity within a specific country, right, it impacts inflation, it impacts wages, and so those are major problems we have to target. But if you're running a global manufacturing company, right, you have your own set of challenges, which hopefully this index, which will be officially launched next year, will help point companies at this as a real challenge and something that is measurable and we can work on to improve as an organization. So when you look at those companies, which represent about $3.8 trillion of delivered product, the average CAGR for productivity improvements has been about 1% a year. Not what it needs to be on an aggregate to keep pace with our growth goals and our population growth within the country. But when you peel back and look at those 166 companies, it is not evenly distributed in terms of these productivity gains. In fact, only 8% of companies really have both short-term and long-term, so over the last 3 years and 10 years, consistent growth in productivity and consistent growth in revenue, right? It's easy in the short term to improve productivity. We can cut our way to productivity. There's entire businesses that then built business models around that. But long term, those assets will not continue to deliver the results you're looking for. So we call these companies Pathfinders. And when you look at these productivity Pathfinders, their average or their total cumulative growth over the last 10 years has been almost 30% in productivity. The other 92% of companies have been a negative growth rate in productivity over that same time period. So there's a big gap today in terms of resources and focus between large enterprises and small and medium enterprises. There's also a huge gap between these Pathfinders and every other large industrial that's publicly traded. There are many other potential areas of research in this data that we'll be exploring over time. One is the hidden factory. So everyone has a different business strategy. So can I keep my asset base the same and deliver more return on those assets over time? That's one strategy. The other is a scalable production system. So if I have real meaningful growth in the industry, can I take my 100 widgets with 10 units of input and scale that to 1,000 and 100, or 100,000 and 1,000? Right, so those are approaches and strategies that really do drive value and drive productivity gains, and we want to study those and highlight what companies are doing. So as we look through those 8% of companies, I wanted to highlight a few of them here today. The first one I wanted to highlight is Lockheed Martin. We've done a case study on them. We've worked with them for many years on their F-35 program. So they have improved productivity over the last 10 years. They've increased throughput over those years, and they've also dramatically improved profit over those years. So it's a great story. What have they done to achieve that? What are the common characteristics that can help companies transform their business and drive these productivity gains? Obviously, they have a great brand. Long-term demand is outstripping capacity. which is always a nice problem to have and one of those key insights we've seen from these Pathfinders. Industrial productivity does not live in a vacuum. They have also reimagined their products. So they have next generation software enabled products along with their next gen approach to manufacturing. They have adapted their business model, one to be much more configured to order, and they don't just now deliver products, they also deliver services with those products for the full life cycle of the product. So they've transformed not just manufacturing, but product design all the way through to service and MRO of those assets over time. They've embraced greenfield facility development. So when they build new facilities, they don't use the old template, right? They build next-gen factories. And they embrace technology, right? They embrace the concept of digital twin, digital thread, IoT, industrial transformation. They were early on in these concepts. They were doing these things in 2015, 2016. But it's not all they did. It was just a piece of what they did to drive these benefits. One of the other companies that stood out, and granted there is some base effect, right? They just started in 2010. 2012 was their first publicly traded year. They just moved from Roadsters to the sedan and Model 3 in 2012. But what Tesla has done over the past 10 years in terms of productivity growth, production scale, and profitability growth really is impressive. So as they have scaled the number of units delivered by over 16,000 over the past 10 years, they have also grown profit and they have also grown productivity. So they don't just think about new products, they think about a new production system that is scalable. So what do they have that has helped them, and what similarities do they have to Lockheed and other Pathfinders? Right, clearly they have a great brand and have a deep connection with their customers. The long-term demand for their products is outstripping their capacity, right? So they can invest, again, in greenfield facilities. They have a next-generation software-enabled product. They changed the way that they deliver products to customers. And they also embrace Industry 4.0 and industrial transformation. But it's not all they did, right? It was part of a larger business strategy to transform their business. So for everyone here in this room who's not Lockheed and who's not Tesla, what can you do to build a strategy that will drive change across your organization? So this is our view of what an industrial transformation strategy should look like. As Mehul referenced, it's really about it should just be your operations strategy. It should not be a separate pillar, a separate initiative. It has to be built into the core of your organization. First, I think you need to name it and brand it as a strategy for your organization. We use the term Operation 2030, which Mehul just introduced. It's a great one. Steal it with pride or come up with your own, but name it and brand it. Clearly set your goals and your targets and refresh and align those to your objectives over time. We like the idea of the power of zero, right? You can never get to zero by just improving 1% every time, every year, every month, every quarter, right? You have to transform to get there. But that might not be the right approach or the right culture for your organization, but set some of those stretch goals for your organization. And then set some of your strategic initiatives. We like the idea of people, process, and technology. So we think companies will really benefit from the idea of having different strategic initiatives aligned to people, process, and technology within your organization that support the overall industrial transformation initiative and operations strategy. So in our language, we call that the future of industrial work, digital performance excellence, and the factory of the future autonomous plant. And so each of those have people, process, and technology capabilities. They all need to be aligned, so you can almost think of it as a matrix. But each one takes the lead in one of those areas, and the others key off it. And then finally, what's the underpinning of this? Thinking architecturally. We call that operational architecture. That's how you scale this technology across the business. Change management. This can't just be a PowerPoint slide. This just can't be something in the heads of folks in corporate. You have to have a change management model that works and engages the 20 to 1,000 plants Mehul mentioned. And then finally, as was shown with the Pathfinders, you have to integrate with the broader value chain. If all you do is sub-optimize within manufacturing and don't think about how that can deliver value on the recipe and formulation side, the R&D side, the way you engage with customers, the value will not hit the financial statements. It will be captured and lost all within your factories, going from one bottleneck to the other. So what are some of the success criteria? What makes this type of strategy work? First, thinking about that end-to-end operating model that does optimize productivity. Having a clear understanding of your burning platform. I see too many companies really focusing on, hey, how do I get that next 10%? But don't have a clear idea of what happens if they don't invest. The idea of technical debt is a great analogy, a great metaphor that has worked well in the technology world. Am I going to spend $100 million to upgrade my ERP system? Yes, many companies are, but it's because they feel like they can't run their business if they don't. There is a benefit to it, but there's also a burning platform to it. It happens with automation systems, right? Can I still buy parts on eBay for my 30-year-old automation system? I can keep that going for a while, but eventually, right, I need to upgrade that system. And we call that the balance between value preservation and value creation, and you really need to understand both sides of that equation. What are some of the common challenges, the pitfalls? Where do we see companies struggling when it comes to building and executing this strategy? The first one is a senior leader with a strategic vision. In operations, it's really easy to get focused on the day-to-day, to delivering product to customers in the way we committed, and not thinking about continuous improvement and transformation. So you do need a strategic leader with this vision, somebody's full-time job whose it is to make sure this is successful. And then acknowledging that that person's role is not just that Factory of the Future technology initiative. That's one of the roles that needs to exist, but you need more. You need somebody looking across how my future of work and my performance excellence system and the new technology of my factories fit together. You need to have a robust governance and change management model, wrapping this all together. And then a lot of folks struggle with this idea of failing to scale because they fail to prove. So we have a maturity model. We shared a lot about it last year. Vision and value are the major stages. The final stage of vision is proving, and there are different levels of proving. So one is technical feasibility, right? Can this work, this new technology? The other is, and a lot of companies miss this piece as well, when I run a pilot, am I just testing new technology, or am I also testing the process change and the organizational change that goes along with that technology change? And does it drive value? So those are two pieces that most companies do on varying degrees of success. But the final piece is, do I get buy-in of a P&L leader within my organization? It could be a plant manager, it could be a divisional manager, the person who has to hit the P&L requirements on a yearly basis. Were they involved in those pilots? Were they involved and did they have buy-in? And will they sign the line to invest in these changes? And will they be the executive sponsor? Will they own it or not? So I hope some of those ideas are valuable and help you push forward your organization. I hope this idea of the Industrial Productivity Index helps shine a bright light on the challenges manufacturers are facing. If you'd like to get involved more or help push that forward in the organization, there's many opportunities to do it. We are recruiting folks to help right now. But with that, I hope you have a great day and a half, and I look forward to engaging with all of you. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage UL Solutions President and Executive Vice President of Enterprise Software and Advisory, John Genovesi.
Good morning, and thanks, Matt. It looks like a great event you and your team have put together. It's a significant honor for me to be able to be here for an address. You know, what I wanted to talk about to everyone is sustainability as a transformation tool. I've unfortunately gotten to the age where I've had a long history of interacting with manufacturing companies. I've seen the evolution of automation. I've seen the introduction of digital transformation and Industry 4.0. I really like the concept that Matt and his team are introducing around industrial transformation, because I think that there are additional opportunities for us to reach into our organization and find that next level of operational improvement. And I suggest to you that it is sustainability. First, I wanted to start by introducing UL Solutions and why I'm up here. A lot of people might wonder why we're participating in an event like this. You probably know UL Solutions as a 130-year-old company that is highly focused and passionate around safety science. The mission is to create a safer world. Our founder would use a term that said, do something good for humanity. And so this tradition of many years has extended now into being a safety, security, and sustainability partner for our customers. So what's that mean? Over that 130 years, safety has evolved, the definition of safety. And so we had to think about extending our influence in the world beyond fire and electrical safety to include solutions that help us solve more modern and emerging trends. Things like ESG reporting, building out renewable energy, creating healthy indoor environments for our employees. So we really believe in this idea of sustainability and think that there are significant tailwinds behind that opportunity. The first that we talk about is renewable energy. And all of us have seen an explosion in investment in renewable energy over the last few years. Whether it was Europe driving to become independent from Russian energy because of the Ukraine war. By the way, I hope safety to all the people who are in the Ukraine war, as well as what's happening in Israel and the Gaza Strip. But beside that, in North America, we had the introduction of the Inflation Reduction Act, which funded a lot of investment in this area. And all of our companies are looking to take advantage of renewable energy to reduce our carbon footprint. Next, this idea of governments expecting more transparency around our carbon reduction and social programs is not going to go away. As Matt said, it's highly politicized. It started in Europe, but it's spreading around the world. Recently, Barry Johnson and I, my VP of sales, we were doing a trip through Asia. All across Asia, all they wanted to talk about was ESG, how they identify programs, and how they report out on it. So this is a growing trend. We see California now releasing their desire to get to full ESG disclosure by 2026. So this is not going to go away. It's going to be a trend. It's going to be something that we need to deal with. And I think that we can take advantage of it to drive operational improvement. Next, you have to talk about AI. You know, you can't turn on CNBC for 15 minutes and not hear the term AI. Generative AI, we've been doing AI for a long time in industry, but generative AI has brought it to the forefront again. And by the way, I tested my theory this morning. I turned on CNBC and it was 6 minutes before I heard about AI. So we're all thinking about it. Everyone's trying to think about how they implement it into their operations to make it more efficient, how they integrate it into their products to make it more innovative. This is a trend that's here to stay. And lastly is the requirement for companies to report and divulge more information about the products they sell. And in this quote, we talk about regulatory governments expecting that. But I would tell you, your consumers expect that. My daughter, starting her young family, reads the label of every product she buys. She doesn't matter if it's food, shampoo, cleaning supplies, the furniture. She's trained herself on the internet to look for hazardous and forever chemicals that she doesn't want into her home. So I'd tell you that the consumer demand will be greater than the regulatory demand around product visibility. As we interact with manufacturing companies, we hear a common set of problems we're all continuing to work on. First is sustainability. Everyone is looking for how do they get to that next level of savings in their operations by using less energy, less water, higher productivity. Next is supply chain performance. COVID-19 destroyed the supply chain around the world. And so every company now is looking to how they bolster that supply chain, how they make sure that it's dependable, and going the next mile to make sure they have visibility into the products that they're sourcing. Training and skilled labor. You know, I've been hearing this my entire career. Matt and I were talking last night, and it seems like now it has really emerged as a serious issue. Everything that's happened around COVID, around the way we run our factories, around being able to access employees, train them, and what the future of work looks like. And then lastly is this digital transformation. And some sources point to that industrial companies, and I couldn't believe this number, but I'll use it anyway. Industrial companies invest $500 billion per year in digital transformation initiatives. And yet we're never done. So I'd tell you, I think a high level of the next focus will be on sustainability transformation. So you can see the tailwinds and the problems we have to solve are high. The good news is that all of this activity will be good for our companies. I think Matt put up earlier profit as one of the drivers for doing the right thing. This is an example. We cite a KPMG study that said the respondents in their study, over half of them said they reduce costs and waste. Half of them said their brand image went up, which is something we need to think about as manufacturers. A lot of times we think about reducing the cost and the waste in the process. We don't think about how we can advertise that to improve our brand reputation. Over half believe it gave them a better handle on enterprise risk. And more we hear, this cites 60%, but more and more we hear that companies are going to tie sustainability or some sort of a carbon footprint metric to executives in order to measure them, in order to make their bonuses. You can see the financial impact. We talk about a couple of customers here that we happen to have good relationships with, and we could get the data. Nestle's been running sustainability initiatives for a long time. This is a food and beverage company, that puts water into its product. They were able to reduce their water consumption 41%. Their operational productivity, you can see, went up 73%. Now, it's over a long period. This is since 2000, so we're looking at a 20-year view. But that's remarkable. Imagine had they done nothing. Kaiser Permanente talks about reducing energy 8%. That hit the bottom line of the company, $20 million per year. And so we think that as you look at delivering sustainability projects, you should consider 3 areas that really are of a high level of focus. The first is regulatory compliance. It's really important, of course, not just because of the constant growing regulations, but the rate of change of regulations and the fact that they change at the federal, state, local levels across every country in the world. Making sure you're compliant and that you understand and avoid unnecessary costs because of penalties or fines is tremendously important. Next, focus on that supply chain. And we think it's not just about understanding the companies you're buying from and that you have a dependable source, but also beginning to understand the formulations of the products you're buying so that you know when you put out a product how sustainable it is. And then lastly is continue to run sustainability initiatives. And when we talk about this, we really talk about continuing to build out investment in renewable energy. Today that's solar and wind, right? But we don't know what renewable energy will look like in the next phase. It's also about those healthy indoor environments, and it is also to get ready for the ESG reporting and the higher level of visibility to your sustainable operations. So I'd like to offer to you a couple of examples. Big names, Kroger, Nestle, everybody knows them. Kroger is the largest US grocer with 2,800 locations, 500,000 employees. Nestle, everyone knows, is understandably the largest food and beverage company in the world. They have a footprint of 81 countries where they do business with 2,000 brands. So as we look at Kroger, I'll frame up the problem. Regulatory requirements insist that a retailer understands every ingredient in every one of the products they sell so that they can identify where there are hazardous chemicals or forever chemicals, and they transport, store, and dispose of those properly. Let me give you an example. A lot of us use shampoo, and we don't think anything of it. You wash, it goes down the drain. We think it's harmless, but not if you have to dispose of 1,000 bottles of old product. There could be an ingredient inside that shampoo that is a hazardous chemical, hazardous to the environment, and will create a tremendous regulatory violation for these companies. So they have to manage hundreds of thousands of products and thousands of suppliers and understand those ingredients. But when I said regulatory is only part of it, what they really enjoyed about that is that now, according to their own policies, they can decide what are green and sustainable products and position those in their stores. And we all know that they typically collect a little more money. So in addition to remaining compliant and the efficiencies that go with that, imagine trying to handle this with a paper or even an electronic system like Excel. The efficiencies that are behind it, but then the growth opportunity for the companies, and not just the retailer, also all of us as manufacturers. When we manufacture a sustainable product, it will stand out to the retailers and take a special spot on their shelves. Next is Nestle. Nestle had a situation where they had to understand environmental health and safety incidents across 1,400 different manufacturing locations around the world. That's a huge number. They wanted to get a view into what their biggest problems were, and so they were able to deploy a system that allowed these incidents to be entered by employees at the local level. Now they had a view into exactly what was happening. They had a view into their biggest problems, how they could address those and get improvement plans. And it helped them meet local regulatory requirements like OSHA standards. This was a huge productivity gain, saved them a tremendous amount of money. And then the next step, socializing the fact that they took this action to their employees who now feel better about the company, their investors, their stakeholders. So I'm also at UL Solutions, one of the executive sponsors for our own sustainability initiatives. And we've deployed a program that is really focused around people, planet, prosperity. The people's about recruiting people, giving them a career path, diversity and inclusion. planet, about reducing our impact, negative impact on the planet, understanding our carbon footprint, energy usage, water usage, and of course, prosperity, which is really our interactions with our customers and our suppliers to ensure a sustainable supply chain. But here's what we learned. Sustainability initiatives in companies are an evolving project. And in order to get real value from it, you have to have a process in which you identify and execute sustainability projects. And so we take a look, we rank and file lots of projects we could do. We assign them a payback, a business impact. It might not always be money, but a business impact. Then we can prioritize the projects we want to go after first. Next, execute. Sounds simple. You have to build a plan. But here's where a lot of companies fall short. They don't really fund the project. They say they want to do it, they release it out to their employees, and then they wonder why it doesn't get done. Well, everybody has a day job already, right? So you have to make sure you identify the resources and the execution plan. We then track and report, make sure we're getting the value out of those projects. And then finally, actually consider third-party assurance, a third party that will come in and evaluate your projects and validate the value that you've seen. It will give your projects more credibility with your stakeholders. So in the end, none of us can do this alone. It's going to take a community. It's going to take a lot of partners. We have some recommendations for that. Look for companies who are leaders in the space, who have a design practice where they focus in this area. That makes sure that they have the expertise that you'll need to execute. An innovative portfolio doesn't hurt. It helps you identify projects that you might be able to speed more value from. And then finally, of course, you want somebody with a great reputation and trusted. So think about that, sustainability as a business transformation and industrial transformation. It's been great to have this opportunity to talk to everyone, and I look forward to interacting over the next couple of days. Thank you all.
Please welcome to the stage Sustainability Leader and Independent Director at Timken Steel, Ellis Jones.
Good morning. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I had 2 hurdles to get over to get here. When the team called me a while ago, I'm in the process of building a home. Been building a home for 2 years. Hope no one else is going through this process, but there's no operational excellence in my builder's process, I can tell you that right now. So the first hurdle was convincing my wife I could leave and come here, so we got over that hurdle. And then the next hurdle was, of course, the airlines, and I almost didn't make it last night, but changed airlines, got in late last night, and it is a pleasure to be here. I couldn't ask for a better setup from our speakers this morning, and none of us, I don't think we talked at all about this, but the setup has been great. You know, we're at a tipping point and I think in industry. And we go through tipping points often in our careers. But I think this is a critical tipping point. I define tipping points in my career, and I've had several of them, and I'm going to talk about a couple of those. But it's when leaders must take action. You get to a point, something's going on, whether it's, sustainability, Industry 4.0, whatever it is, but you get to a point where leaders need to take action. And we are at a tipping point. And we're going to talk about leadership. I was in Turkey a few years ago. I was environmental health, safety, sustainability leader for Goodyear. Spent 35 years at Goodyear. And I was at Turkey, and we were walking through the plant. It was one of our top performing plants in many indicators. And they were the top performing plant for safety. And I wanted to go to this plant to see what they did. How did they do it? And I'm walking the floor, on the gimbal walk, and I'm going through it with the leaders. So I decided to challenge one of the leaders. I was hearing it, and I said, after we went through a team huddle startup session, and I asked the leader, I said, what makes you think, or what makes you believe that the team really gets it? How do you know? How do you know that when they go out on the shop floor, safety is at the top of mind in everything they do? And he kind of looked at me with this strange look. He said, Ellis, I don't understand the question. I said, how do you know? And we went back and forth, and finally he said, Ellis, safety is the liquid of the soup. I looked at him and I said, excuse me? He said, look, without no liquid, there's no soup. Without safety, there's no operation in this plant. That's our environment, that's our culture, that's how we operate. And it really made me think, and as I went on, as I thought about these things, I always think about, in any change, what's the liquid of the soup? And when I think about the journey to 2030, the journey to zero, I think about what's the liquid in this journey? How do we really think about this? So I want to talk about that. Look, leading the journey, it's going to take courage. It's going to take leadership. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later in the presentation. But I look at 4 critical areas. I think about influence, connect and integrate, and deploy strategy. And again, I'll go through these a little bit later, and they're so critical when I think about leading this journey and how we go forward, and how you go forward, and how your teams go forward. I don't think I have to convince anyone in this room, but you really need to think about the liquid in your soup and then those leaders below you. And how are they leading this journey? Very important. I'll just use some quick data, and again, the speaker set it up. John really talked about it well. I love when Ops Leader gives that story and gives that justification for sustainability. Russell Reynolds did a poll and did a study, and look, it's not going away. So leaders are saying, look, we're facing our issues. These are issues that are going to challenge us and challenge our businesses from being successful. So we're getting after it. We're developing the plans and the responses. So leaders are saying, we're developing the plans and the responses. Are they confident? Confidence dips a little. So you're confident that you can get there. And still high level, but it's starting to dip. And then when we talk about investment, are you making the investments? Are they going to increase? Are they going to decrease? Or they stay the same? You can see what leaders are saying. But there was the takeaway and the insight from this study from Russell Reynolds. I found it very interesting, and I think it meets the occasion. There were several gaps. There was a motivational gap, where leaders and people below the leaders felt or didn't feel motivated. There was a mobilization gap. They found that at the lowest level, people wanted to go. They wanted to move. But they felt leaders lacked that vision and that strategy to mobilize them. There was an accountability gap. They weren't being held accountable, and there was, how do you hold leaders accountable? John just mentioned it. Do you put it in the senior leaders' KPIs for executive compensation and for pay? How do you hold people accountable for it? And then they said there was a leadership gap, but I think all these are leadership gaps that we have to face and we have to take on. So when I think about the liquid in the soup, the liquid in this journey to 2030, I think it's about leadership. And how do we lead it? We all lead differently, but how do we lead this journey to get there? Because it's not going away. And how do we teach leaders below us to lead this journey? So I mentioned career tipping points. I have 2, I think, for me, what really drives it home, I have 2 tipping points in my career that really say, man, leadership can really make or make or break this transformation. One, I may have told this story last year, but I was asked to take over an operation. It was the worst operation in our footprint. It was number 45 of 45. Every statistical measure, 45 of 45. Safety, worse. Waste, worse. Productivity, worse. Cost, worse. Everything. You name it, you throw out an indicator, I say we were worse. And when I addressed the team for the first time, this is the response I received from the union. There's a worker in the front row. He said, Ellis, because I was the 8th leader in 10 years. He said, don't take this personally, but we have no expectation of you whatsoever. None. We're going to continue to be the worst. When I took it over, and when the leadership team said, take it over, we were starting our OpEx journey as a company. But guess what they told me? Ellis, you can't start. You're too small. We're not going to waste our time there. We're going to focus on other areas. And the CEO said, if I tell you not to start, pulled us all in, leaders, you can't start. There will be consequences if you go before I say go. The other thing they did is they gave me this book from a consulting firm that said, basically, if you want to improve this plant, lay off about 30% of the workforce to cut your costs. So that was the setup for me walking in. I would say years later, I'll talk about some of the things that we did, but years later, this plant received the AME award. This plant became one of the safest plants. This plant became one of the most productive plants. This plant had one of the best union-company relationships. I know this guy who said this today. I talked to him. He's a friend of mine. But there are lessons in that. And there are lessons in leadership in that. I'll talk about a few of those. But that was the transformation that I think leadership as the liquid of the soup, that's the transformation that occurred. Now, I'll tell you, they received the AME award after I left, which made me so proud because they sustained it, and the leaders that stayed and the leader that came on board kept moving with the journey. The second tipping point. As I moved into the organization, I took over environmental health, safety, and sustainability. And this actually, I said senior leader, but I'll tell you, it was my CEO. My CEO gave me the Courage Award in that previous role, and he basically said, Ellis, you displayed courage because you didn't listen to me and you didn't listen to us. You moved on and you started. So I take on the role of environmental health, safety, sustainability global leader. In the first meeting, he says, Ellis, this is 2015, 16. He says, look, and we had a safety problem in the company. He said, don't waste your time on sustainability. If you spend more than 10% of your time on sustainability, you're wasting your time. I said, holy cow. Now, I didn't know at the time, but we had a safety issue. And he wanted me to focus on safety. I said, I got it. About 4 weeks later, we had an NGO campaign against us. So that strategy of not focusing on sustainability went out the window. But what happened over the 3 or 4 years, we went from a low level of maturity and sustainability, I would say a level 1, where one person is really driving it. Level 2, you have a department kind of driving it. Everyone says it's their problem. We went to a level 3, level 4. Level 3 says functions are engaged. Functions start to own it. Functions start to build the capability. You see the integration in the functions. We started to go level 4. Before I retired from Goodyear, we announced that we were going to roll out the first sustainable material tire. CEO announced it at the CES show. We didn't even know he was going to announce it. He announced it. They came and said, Ellis, did you know about this? I said, I had no idea. He says, we're going to do it. First sustainable material tire. And Goodyear's going to do that this year. So we went from don't waste your time to this level 4 maturity where it was integrated into our business. It was integrated into our strategy. We had a vision, and we started to move forward. The power of leadership. Again, I'll talk about some of the things that we did there. But, some key things that I learned. Look, if you're working on today's problems, you're losing. I always tell my teams that. If you're working on today's problems, as a leader, you're losing. And I can't focus. I have to be looking at tomorrow and what's going on tomorrow. It's so critical for your organization. Look, again, if you're waiting, I told my teams all the time, if you're waiting for me to say start, if you're at the start, and you have to realize that, again, I don't think we have to convince people in this room, but there are leaders below you waiting for you to say go. And I look back at those tipping points for me, people often said, don't go. And I had to just go. And we have to be aware of the leaders below us, and are they waiting for us to say go? So again, if you're waiting for me to give you permission, I tell my teams this all the time. You already lost the race. If you're waiting for someone to give you permission, you already lost the race. It's, again, as John said, it's not going away. Sustainability not going away. So we have to move, and we have to figure out how to move. There are false starts, and we hate false starts. There are false starts, and there are penalties for false starts, but you have to get past that. You have to move beyond that as a leader. For me, my mindset as a leader is, I'm not afraid of failure. We're going to fail sometimes. It's the inaction that I'm afraid of. What happens if I don't take action? So critical. And that's what I try to drive through to my teams. So when I think about the courage, again, we all do this differently. When I think about leadership, it's hard. But these are the four things, the three key things. There are 4 items here, but, 3 categories. But influence. The power of influence. When we talk about change management, and I use a model, influencer model, where you look at ability, you look at motivation. We often think about, well, someone's not changing because they don't have the ability to change. They don't understand sustainability, or they don't understand how to stay safe. Often it's motivation. And how do you motivate people? There are different ways you do it. I'll tell you what, my CEO, I knew he hated to lose. Peer pressure is motivation. He hated to lose to Michelin and Bridgestone. What would I do? They were always ahead of us on sustainability. Every chart I showed him had Michelin, Bridgestone, Continental on it. My general counsel would say, Ellis, don't take that into his office. I say, I'm taking it in. And he would just go crazy. Ellis, how do you know? How do you know they're better than us? Flip the page. There's the data. He hated it, but he was competitive. And finally he said, Ellis, get us to where they are and figure out how we get ahead of them. All right, let's go. So you have to figure out how to influence. You have to figure out personal motivation, personal ability, social motivation, social ability, peer pressure, structural motivation, structural ability. John talked about compensation. That's a part of motivation. That's structural motivation. Connect and integrate. You have to connect and integrate. Structure, environment, capability. How do you connect sustainability, safety, and integrate it into everything you do? The environment is so critical. The culture that you develop in your organization. Remember, safety is the water of the soup. Sustainability has to be integrated into your culture. You have to mobilize your organization. Don't just look at the top, but how do you mobilize, and how do you influence, and how do you energize those people at every level of your organization? And then capability. there is capability that we have to develop as an organization when you're looking at these challenges. The third is deploy, strategy deployment. So important. Again, it was mentioned this morning. Man, if you can't develop that strategy, man, you're not going to win the team. And more importantly, man, if the strategy just goes into the drawer, or as a senior leadership team, you say, hey, we got a great strategy. But if you don't deploy it through the organization, align the organization to create that line of sight where everyone in the organization says, here's what I need to do to drive sustainability. In Goodyear, we went all the way down to the functions. If you're in material science, here's what you need to do on a daily basis within your job to help us develop more sustainable products. So creating that line of sight throughout your organization is so critical to winning these big challenges. So again, you see the light flashing here? These are critical. When I think about the liquid of the soup for the journey, I think about leading with courage. I think about influencing. I think about connecting and integrating through structure, systems and processes, environment, culture, physical environment, and capability, learning systems. Sometimes we have to unlearn and learn new. And I think about strategy deployment. How do we create the vision for winning? But more importantly, how do we deploy it and create line of sight throughout our organization so everyone understands their part on a daily basis for winning? It's so critical. So again, I challenge everyone in the room, as you think about your journeys, as you think about your teams, what's the liquid? What's the liquid in your soup? What's critical to you winning this battle and getting to zero? So with that, everyone have a great day, have a great week. I'm excited to have discussions with everyone. Had some great discussions this morning at the table, and looking forward to more discussions as we go throughout the next day and a half. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. What an exciting keynote. Can everyone give all of our keynotes a huge round of applause? Couple of helpful reminders before we go off to our roundtables. Remember what I said. Talk to someone you don't know. It is absolutely important to drive meaningful relationships. 2 quick reminders. We are totally a paperless event. We don't have any paper surveys. I would recommend you please take 30 seconds to download the app. We have a survey after every session. It'll take 30 seconds. It'll help us get some really good feedback for us to improve. All of our roundtables are on, most of our roundtables are on level 12 and level 11. You can take the elevator. There are also stairs right next to where you checked in. Let's see. We have an executive panel here at 4. Our roundtable starts in probably 20, 25 minutes. Make sure you take some refreshment, coffee, and I hope you have a really productive and engaging day, and we'll see you at the executive panel at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Join us here again today at 4 p.m. for our executive panel. Enjoy your roundtable session.